Okay, now, so I'm going to switch to my Excel with the undergrad survey data. Okay, and maybe it's better I close this because it covers some of the menu items. So let's try to use the pivot table functionality now to take a look into the relationship between class, junior, senior, and sophomore, and grad intention to go to graduate school, which is yes, undecided, or no. And let's try to calculate some conditional probabilities with the pivot table. And as usual, we insert the pivot table and the default selection can be accepted. And now here we just select the class standing, bring it to row labels, grad intention, we can bring it to column labels. Just one more time, grad intention to values. So now we get actually the contingency table with the frequencies of students who are junior and who will not go to graduate school. So this is 4 who are undecided, 7 students who are junior, and junior students who have the intention to go to graduate school is 14. So we can now actually use some pivot table functionalities to turn these into frequencies. So we can then interpret them as probabilities. So let's try to do that with clicking on the count of grade, which is the default. Now I can choose value field settings, and I can choose show values as, and normally it says no calculation. And if you click on that, you have 3 options which can be used to find all these probabilities for us. So let's first select the percent of grand total. Now let's click OK. And now what do we have? So everything is represented as the percent of grand total. So if you look into junior and no, so this intersection of that, 6.45% is the probability of being junior and not wanting to go to graduate school. So we can represent this as probability of junior and no graduate school. And this could be represented as probability of junior and undecided, 11%. And the row and column totals could be taken as the marginal probabilities. So the probability of a randomly selected student being junior is 0.40 here, being senior 0.50 here. Okay, so now I want to change that a bit. Again, go to value field settings, show values as, and I want to now represent things as percent of column total. Okay, so let's change it. So now the columns at 200. Okay, so as a percent of the people who won't go to graduate school, what percent of them are juniors? What percent of them are seniors? And what percent are sophomores? So this is the conditional probability. So this here gives us the probability of being a junior student given you have selected I won't go to graduate school. So this is basically probability of junior given no. Okay, and this 54% is the probability of being senior given you are undecided. So when you're looking at the columns, and you can see the conditional probabilities with the variable in the columns. Furthermore, let me change that value field settings into percent of row total. Okay, and now I have actually the rows summing to 1. So now I have the probabilities, probability of being undecided given you're a junior, which is 28%. Probability of being undecided given you're a junior. Probability of positive decision for graduate school, given you're a senior, is actually 38%. Okay, yes, given senior. And also probability of no given sophomore is 16.67. So we could use these three options. Again, we invoke them from count, from value field settings, and by default it's count, and we can change it to percent of total, percent of column total, and percent of row total. So these two would give us the conditional probabilities, and the first one would give us the joint probabilities. And for the marginals, we could just look at the totals, and they would give us the marginal probabilities of the row and column variables. So let me convert this back to no calculation again. And we have 62 students here. The contingency table gives us the breakdown with respect to class standing and decision for graduate schools. And I could also use this slicer to further give me some subsets of this data. So suppose I want to also use GPA here, which is a numerical variable. And you can select any number of slicers. You can select GPA and spending. But let me select GPA here. Okay. And by clicking on the values here, so I could just now represent only those who have a GPA equal to 2.3 or just 2.4. Or I could use the highlight using Shift and the arrow key. For example, I could just try to break down my data into the group whose GPA is below 3.0. And it seems to me now that there are 17 people whose GPAs are below 3.0. Or I could just, again, using the Shift key and the arrow, I could highlight those who have a GPA greater than 3.0. So the slicer actually is a good technical tool. So you can further break down your pivot tables, and you can clear the filter so you can go back to your data. And if you want to just remove that back to your original pivot table, you can just go back to your original view. Okay, and that is basically a demonstration of the pivot table for using, for finding probabilities, joint probabilities, conditional probabilities,